Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the St. Louis podcast. I'm your glorious host today, Eric Brown, president of iMedia and partner at Mogul Holdings. Today, we have Victoria Pelletier on the St. Louis podcast. Let's see. Let's tell a little bit about Victoria. So, recognized across North America as a dynamic, captivating keynote speaker, published author, and dynamic executive. 3 books that she has just wrote Unstoppable, Influence, and the Power of Whole Human Leadership. Which one did you say just recently came out?
The Power of Whole Human Leadership, Influence Unleashed was earlier this year.
Perfect. So go on Amazon and go ahead and look that stuff up. Great reviews. I actually looked them up beforehand. So you have a lot of accolades. You have a lot of background, involved in over or close to 40 M&A transactions, successfully re-engineered organizational structures, operations, processes, and technology to achieve or exceed revenue and growth targets. You have a ton of awards as well. I'll let people just go to your LinkedIn or go to your website if they want to take a look at those. So I'm really excited to talk to you today. We have a ton of different people that listen to this podcast, from just, normal listeners that work, a 9 to 5 up to business owners and different people across the board. So I think one of the first podcasts we did, one of the first 10 was we kind of focused on mergers and acquisitions, but it was really for a digital marketing perspective because I was very ignorant when it comes to that type of stuff. And I will say I'll probably ask some of the same questions because I'm still very ignorant in that topic. We'll talk about, some things that you take a look at when you come into a business, because especially now with everything going up as far as payroll and things like that for small businesses, software costs, costs are going through the roof. So I think you can lend some insight on what you kind of look at from from an operations side and also just from a board side when it comes to, how to look at finances and really what can business owners do, small or large, or executives, or whatever your role is in that business, to take those changes. So first of all, let's talk about your books real quick. Okay. So what made you originally want to start to become an author? Obviously, you have a ton of background in these different subjects. Unstoppable was your first. Why did you want to go into being an author? What made you want to go ahead and kind of take that dive into doing that?
So the first book, Unstoppable, I'm a contributing author, so I'm one of many. I'm the opening chapter. The publishers approached me,
Okay.
and I thought, like, wow, this is like serendipitous. I sign a majority of my social media posts with 2 hashtags.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is unstoppable. Like, that's my life's philosophy and
Perfect
mantra. So I'm
fit.
like, okay, well, this is just meant to be. The other one, just FYI, is no excuses, is that second hashtag. But and so when they approached me, it was also at a time where, and so this one is, it's called Unstoppable: Changemakers Who Dare to Make a Difference, is the full title.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the first time I shared, certainly this widely, and this format, a lot of my personal journey and story. I used to not talk as openly about it. And maybe a couple of years before the book, I had started sharing it in keynote presentations and just saw the power behind it. So I was very happy to contribute to that book. And that was then what sort of spurred me on to think, okay, well, I'm going to do my own whole book at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And when I left my employer last year, and I actually thought I had a job to go to, and the CEO I was working for got fired before it got papered. I was like, well, okay, I guess, one, now I'm in the job market, and 2, with this time on my hands, what am I going to do as I'm looking for, my next role? And so that's when I decided to write the book. But I couldn't decide between the 2 topics of branding and leadership because I talk about them all the time. So I did both, which was a lot to chew off in 1 year.
Yeah, that's a lot to talk about. And both of those things are super important. Branding, I say more so now than ever, just because there's so many people out there. I feel like, and I don't know, right? I've really only been in, I'll say, business for 9 years now. And I feel like back in the day, there used to be a lot less functions and speakers and things like that in general. And now when you go on social media, there's so many people, that you don't know if that person has a good background, if they know what they're talking about or not. And establishing credibility through your brand is one easy way to really kind of break through that noise. And that's one reason why, of course, I do this podcast, right? Is to go ahead and do exactly that. So, what do you when it comes to running a business? Looking at leadership, looking at operations, looking at sales, looking at marketing, what do you think is like the most important thing to look at if you're a small business? Or is there one?
I wish I could tell you, Eric, that there's like a silver bullet,
Mhm.
um, but there's not. And so, I mean, it's so complex. And so it's the balance of all of these things. I mean, so for a small business, I mean, you want right market fit for whatever product or service that your business is engaged in. But then to the point we're just talking about, like branding, you need a strong corporate brand, and then personal brand for the individuals who stand behind it or selling the business is important.
Mhm.
I will always say, and my roots started in the operational side of businesses before I grew into broader general management and leading commercial teams. Good delivery sells. So at the end of the day, if you have you have customers and you continue to deliver exceptionally for them, you build brand loyalty and they continue to buy from you. And in my world, I spent, since I moved out of like B2C banking, direct to consumer banking, and running large scale operations into the world of B2B professional services, even more so. Like, so I'm used to delivering large long-term contracts, delivering services for companies. So delivery sells. So again, not a silver bullet, but I tend to double down on how important that is. But good delivery is then a function of a bunch of different things, from the right systems, and by systems, processes, plus the technology, good leadership, and I have a value of just doing the right thing, and then that leads to good delivery and operational success.
Yeah, delivery is key, and I think it sounds easy to go out there and do a good job, but looking at the back end of what actually goes into that, there's a lot to go ahead and set up and make sure that everything is working properly. Now, you brought up something in my that I thought about, and I actually posted about this a couple weeks ago. And it seems like, those small businesses or medium-sized businesses that have a great reputation, of delivery. And then eventually they get to a point or they get to a scale in their business where I don't know if they become too large, but it's almost like they lose sight of that. Have you seen that play out personally? And if so, and if you haven't, I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I've seen it time and time again. And it's a result of a few different factors, and many of them can be, as you suggested, just the growth, and they scale so quickly. So their ability to, stay caught up and continue to deliver. So there's some planning that needs to be required on that. The other, and I have a point on that one I'll come back to, but the other can also be on looking to take cost out of the business and just stripping away too much. And then we start to see that we've just gone too far. And so again, there's a balance around that. And then that comes back to like commercial pricing strategy, in terms of like, I'm married with the right people, process, technology. So on the former, I think something really importantly. So although I say delivery sells, recovery, and done well, done effectively, can build customers for life. And so when we mess up in business, I think what's really important is to own up to it
Mhm.
and talk about and fix it. And fix it might be refunding a customer. And sometimes there's not an exact fix. But again, and more of, and again, I spend a lot of time in B2B. And so the relationships really matter. And so continuing to maintain trust, even in during times of failure, by owning that, talking about the process by which we're going to ensure this doesn't happen again, and creating some kind of, sometimes it's compensation or it's something that, so I don't think we don't need to be perfect. We're all in our delivery, but again, how do we recover from this and own up to it and maintain accountability, is critical.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing, and maybe it's in all industries, but it seems like that's a very large part of what goes wrong in marketing agencies, is no accountability, and not only that, it's we have companies that spend obviously hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars or whatever it is, and these marketing companies, don't track this stuff and aren't held accountable with the actual results that they're getting. And so many business owners have been burned by bad marketing companies for that exact reason. But it's not only that, we work with a lot of home service companies and they're well known, right? There's a deals gone bad. I'm sure in every single city there's a Facebook group for that. And it seems like every day, a lot of these people want to go ahead and start their own business and do these contract jobs, and it goes to hell. It goes to hell very quickly. And of course, these people don't own up to it, aren't accountable. And it's a big actually problem here in the Midwest and Missouri with like contractors and things like that. I think it's one of the most litigated states for that because there's not that many licenses and things that you need in St. Louis and Missouri to do that type of business. But you hear it all the time in marketing as well. Uh, so I'm curious when it comes to, mergers and acquisitions. Like I kind of talked to you before, we started Mogul Holdings a couple years ago. We started our insulation contracting business, and we focus a lot more on like the home service side of things, just because we know that's where with the backbone of these companies can provide really the leads at the end of the day and the brand awareness to grow these businesses. But when it comes to there's a I really the big thing I think now is there's a lot of people leaving corporate jobs, right? And there has been. There's just been this exodus over the last 5 years. And there's a lot of people, number one, young that are trying to start a business, but not only that, looking at like there's a lot of like 45 to like 60-year-olds that are, they have money now from their corporate job and they're able to now actually go start their own business, right? So when it comes to them, usually they're already buying a business. So I'm curious when it comes to buying a business, what are some things to really kind of take a look at on the back end, right? Because of course you can look at revenue numbers, but at the end of the day, revenue doesn't mean anything if there's no profit, right? And then obviously you can have employees that are unhappy. And I mean, it could all fall apart in the matter of a second. So, what are some things that you would take a look at, if you're buying a business and things like that?
So there's a lot that look at. So the due diligence behind,
Hmm.
the acquisition of a company should be like very in depth. And there's different things. And that's why they look at different multiples depending on the different types of businesses. So some will pay a multiple on revenue, some it's going to be on EBIT or profit, some it's on ARR, which is annual recurring revenue. So subscriptions or contracts that you have. So there there's many different things I look at. So I'm thinking you said, many of your clients are, home service. So they're a big part of it. In that case, you're looking at brand, you're certainly looking at revenue. You're in this case, a lot of it's going to be based upon the delivery of the services. So the people you have become very critical in that. I look at in some of the, ones that I've looked at, there are people that are, you know, so critical because they own client relationships that it's at risk if we don't secure those. So, for me, it's a multitude of the brand of the organization. Again, product, service, fit. Where do I see it going in the future in terms of share of wallet or market share out there? To the people that are involved. To in many cases where I spend a lot of time, like I acquired one company in 2017 for myself personally, and it was a combo SaaS company with some services associated to it, and there was annual recurring revenue contracts. And so I spent time looking at the contracts and the terms specifically within there. And some things can go wrong. And in that business, the former owner of that company, she misrepresented in our due diligence folder some of those invoices and contracts. So I had to go and sue her later. So it's not perfect, but those are things that I'm looking at as well. And things like, and then subsequently, once a decision is made and terms on pricing are agreed, the what's usually called like a TSA, like a transitional services agreement in terms of what's in place. And many times I'll encourage as well the term specifically, not just the price for the business, how it gets paid. So many times there's a lump sum and then management buyout, but commitment to contracts and revenue. And so that can somewhat protect or insulate against some of the things that I'm talking about. So again, it's super complex. And this is why I normally say, like, if this is your first time doing it, you might have found an amazing company, but get some support who can help come in with a lot of this due diligence, because there's just things you might not know to even be looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a ton when it comes to that. One of our first, I guess, acquisitions or mergers that we tried to do was actually before our holding company with a contracting business. And we learned very quickly that it's important to look at the back end. Because we were like, this sounds great. And we did a little bit of research. We had been working with the client for a little bit. And yeah, it didn't end up working out in our favor. And at the short end, it didn't end up working out at all. So due diligence is huge, especially if you're spending money on buying a business. You don't want to be misrepresented. You want to make sure your dollars are as going as far as possible. And that's one thing. You brought up relationships, because I think that's one thing, unlike with West County Insulation, our insulation contracting business. you know, we have relationships, but it's more so marketing, right? And just people that need that service, they look it up or they know the brand and they research that. But when it's more of a B2B service-based business, if say we sold Vi and the majority of people that came to Vi were through me, but I'm no longer there, or your home service company and the owner is the person that's like responsible for a lot of the knowledge of doing jobs behind the business. It all of a sudden makes it a lot harder to buy that business, because that key person arguably needs to be there. Otherwise the valuation just isn't what it is then.
Yeah. And that's why you see in a lot of acquisitions like that, the owner, or maybe there's some other key resources and they're named as critical key resources, are locked in for a period of time. So actually, even a good friend of mine, he sold he's got like a plastic packaging company. I think that does like the wrap for Gatorade or something like that. He
Interesting.
sold that a couple of years ago to a much larger like firm, but their ask was that he stay on for 1 year because he had the relationships. And so to see that seamlessly and get any support, et cetera. And so you'll see named individuals. I've been a part of companies that have been acquired and have been named a critical resource, which meant, good news, bad news for me. I got a bonus to stay for a period of time to help them through transition. And if I left before that, I had to pay it back, but there's some incentive for doing it. So there's lots of ways to work that into the deal, but you need to know that up front and need to plan for it. And in many cases, as I've outlined, compensate those individuals for it as well.
Yeah, yeah. And we kind of talked before we started recording about, from an employee standpoint, right? Acquisitions. Your company gets acquired by a larger entity, or let's just say a private equity group. The, I guess, kind of the common consensus among the employees is that usually this isn't going to work out in our favor. Uh, do you find that sentiment to be true? And if so, why?
Uh, so the answer is it depends on which employees in those organizations. Usually works out very well for the executives,
Yes. Yep.
for sure. But at the front to mid level, of course, everyone generally is concerned. When you look at private equity in particular, their hold strategy is 3 to 7 years. So they're coming in to acquire a company. Maybe they're merging them. There's a roll up play with a bunch of others. And with that comes reorganization and cost takeout.
Mhm.
And so there is, rightfully so, for an employee level, some fear. And what does that mean in terms of my own job security? What is that path, going to look like? And that's rightfully so. And so I actually think from a communication strategy, like, let's not shy away from that conversation. Again, to our prior topic over, like, retain the critical employees that you need to, but for the rest of the employees, let's be honest. And sometimes at the beginning of that transaction, you don't know. So I've been in situations where I own the workforce and need to communicate that to them, and sometimes saying, I don't know what I don't know right now. What I commit to you is I'm going to come back to you when I do, with as much notice for anyone who's going to be impacted. And in some cases, it's actually they're acquiring it to invest and grow, and that creates amazing opportunity for those that are maybe one of the first to be acquired, as to give them the opportunity to move up and be a part. And so I think there's some transparency that's lacking, but that helps dramatically with retention, and the engagement of, the acquired company, in terms of having them stay, maintaining the institutional knowledge, with those individuals, and ideally leveraging them to help like grow for future.
Yeah. Yeah, that's no, that's great insight. Yeah, because a lot of the time people are always worried about that, and it seems like going back to kind of the scaling issue, again, this you could work for a company forever and great relationships, it's a great workplace, and then all of a sudden things change dramatically or things are about to change dramatically. And like you said, the leadership of the company is just not transparent, right? With the people that, I mean, at the end of the day, some of those people ended up getting them to that position that they're now in to go ahead and get acquired or sell that business, in the first place. So I wanted to talk about synergy between departments. And I think this is an interesting topic because especially with marketing. So, I'm in charge of relationships and sales. So, getting at first, when we started the business, we were a little bit smaller, right? I was a lot of the time working directly with our creative and fulfillment team, which I am now, but I've learned a lot better how to communicate with those people. Because the DIS test, I'm very D and I, and of course, a lot of fulfillment when it comes to marketing is not so much on that side of the personality. So I'm like, let's do it now, let's do it now, let's get it done. And obviously, creatives, especially performance, they're looking at numbers. They need time to look things over and then make that decision. Whereas my decision's essentially already made. So when it comes to working with other departments, and really one thing actually I think is interesting is the marketing and sales component of those two different departments, because marketing and sales always butt heads, right? Sales is, hey, we want appointments, and marketing is like, branding. Obviously, we want appointments, but we're trying to push branding. And they're always butting heads. One person wants one message, one person wants the other. So, what are your thoughts around really creating a well collaborative environment or isolating certain people or groups away from each other? That way there isn't that conflict to begin with.
Well, I'm never going to recommend isolating
Yeah.
any part of the organization, because I do think, I mean, they all have critical parts to play
Yeah.
in the success of the organization. So, to your point around DISC, I'm a DI as well, and so I think there's an element of both as individual contributors and leaders, at figuring out ways to work with those that are different from us, and gaining alignment. And to the alignment piece, what I think is really important, um, is to have metrics that we are all driving towards, and we're in the way in which success is measured and we're compensated. So incentives drive behavior. And so for sales and marketing, as an example, I would say, like, ultimately, I think there's you see in many companies, they've got an organization, the way in which bonuses are determined. There's like organizational objectives, typically revenue and profit. Did we grow? Did we hit the number? So that's it. There's the company multiplier. And then at the individual level, and this is where I think there needs to be greater alignment. So for sales, yes, we're going to have growth. Maybe we're going to have it if there's any kind of, if they're controlling the contracts and the pricing and profitability, and maybe it's standard. And, for some of your listeners here. Uh, and then for marketing, yes, there's going to be employer brand metrics, but to your point, that's not necessarily driving the sales. So they need to have some metrics. And maybe it's click through, you'll know what those are better than me, click through rates, or maybe there's some other lead generation that part of the marketing team handles up, whatever.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
those need to be aligned. Ultimately, that align to the organizational objectives. And that's where I see it go wrong. So I see, in the world I've been in, like sales, it's all about like new sales. And in some cases, yeah, there's the profitability of the contracts that they sell. But they do that almost at any cost, and then the operations team can't deliver. And so that's where you see this butting heads as well. So again, there needs to be alignment and some check and balance. And this is where, again, in the big companies I've been in, maybe not in the ones you're talking about, there's a sales operation, like there's a function. And then there's some checks and balance that happens to make sure everyone, agrees to the proposal we're putting in front of a client, in terms of the solution we're delivering and the price we're going to deliver it at. And so then we're all locked step in agreement in terms of how we're going to move forward. And then we have less of that kind of, banging heads later.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because you brought up a great point with everybody butts heads in the organizations with the sales department because they just want to get paid at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
So, especially you brought up a great point with operations and maybe cutting profitability because we offer incentives, offer discounts, offer extra products or services that are going to cost more money. Let me tell you, I did that for probably the first 4 or 5 years in business. I wouldn't say all the time, but I was known as, throwing some free stuff in. But at the end of the day, for us, it made the difference. It ended up paying its dividends, so it was well worth it.
Hey there, St. Louis podcast listeners. We've got some exciting news from our friends over at Farmers Insurance of St. Louis, led by the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Lee of Farmers Insurance.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking for a job or to own your own business under a brand that everyone and their cousin is familiar with, Mark Lee with Farmers Insurance of St. Louis is recruiting insurance agency owners here in St. Louis for their Farmers Insurance Mentorship Program.
And as many of you are aware, Garrett and I have owned quite a few successful and award-winning businesses over the years. And in a past life, one of those was a farmers insurance agency out of Chesterfield, Missouri.
Eric and I know firsthand how hard it is to start a business under a brand that no one has heard of and convince consumers and businesses to trust that you're an authority figure in your industry.
And as many of you know, we own an award-winning marketing firm, Vi Media, the one that Garrett was just discussing. And building that company's reputation literally took years. We're still building it to this day, and it's been 8 years in the making. However, with the Trusted Farmers Insurance Agency name on the building, we got started when we started our Farmers Insurance Agency. The trust was already built and has been for 96 years.
And if you can't do math, that means Farmers Insurance has been around since 1928. Luckily, you don't need to be a human calculator to get rich as an owner of your very own Farmers Insurance Agency.
Nope. All you have to do is reach out to the one and only Mark Lee, the leader of Farmers Insurance in the greater St. Louis metropolitan area.
That's right. So ensure he continues to sponsor our show and your favorite podcast, the St. Louis Podcast, by quitting your job today and calling Mark Lee. I wouldn't even wait for him to answer your call. Call your boss now, quit, and become your very own business owner.
Mm-hmm. Visit insurancecareerstl.com. That is insurancecareerstl.com. Should we spell it out?
Yes. It would
INSURANCE. Career, CAREER, STL.com, insurancecareerstl.com. Go there now. Back to the podcast.
And wait, insurancecareerstl.com.
Back to the podcast. So we've worked with a lot of, I would say, I guess, mid-sized companies, like let's say around like the $50 million mark, where a lot of these businesses, it seems like they have like one person in charge of both marketing and business development. So it's like a CMO, and then somehow they oversee both departments. And then I see where that becomes an issue because either that person's background is business development sales or that person's background is marketing, where realistically those two people, it should be two people working together. It should not just be one person, because then you find out either one or two is going to be slacking if that's the case. Have you found that to be a thing in businesses?
Although I'm mostly in larger corporations, I've built and bought some small companies myself, and I do a lot of coaching and mentorship for those in the startup space. And I do see it when the company is smaller, people are wearing multiple hats. But this is where you need to have leaders wearing those multiple hats, having team members who come with the strength that you do not. So I think of my first executive role, I stepped in, I said, I got recruited out of banking operations to leading all facets of a company except for finance. I didn't at that point. I hadn't been leading technology teams. I hadn't been leading the sales and marketing teams. So I needed to make sure that I had amazing people on my team as heads of those departments who knew way, way more than that I could lean and trust on heavily. And so that's what I'd say is if you're going to double hat, which again, in smaller organizations, you may need to just make sure you find the support. And in many cases, there's been a massive rise around fractional leaders. And so this is where I'd say to the founder or CEO of a company, like if you can't afford to have two of, then hire a fractional CMO and a fractional chief revenue officer or sales leader. And then you get the best of both until such time as you grow. And then you can have a full-time, resource for each of those.
Yeah, fractional positions are interesting. I feel like I don't know if that really kind of became a thing in like 2020 and maybe beforehand, but I feel like that kind of blew up during that time period. And we actually have a fractional CFO that helps us with things at our holding company and at Vi because full time would just cost too much.
Right.
But the insight, I will say that the insight that lent us because we thought, I mean, we're all fairly smart individuals that own the company, but none of us really have a background in like, finance per se. And you don't know what you don't know. So having that person, I mean, we met him a couple years ago and we've learned a ton about all the different aspects of finance in a business. Because beforehand, I would say, I looked at a profit and loss and that was about it, so learning that stuff from a business owner's perspective, and it is I feel like it is annoying that, I've talked about it before that this stuff just isn't taught to us anywhere. You really have to just learn it on your own or work at a company where you work underneath someone that teaches that to you, right? Which brings me into a great question. I talk about like mentorship and coaches and that kind of realm a lot. So when it comes to executives, I'm curious what your thoughts are with or just starting a business, entrepreneurs, or even executives that have been doing it forever. I'm sure they still have mentors, right? So when it comes to mentorship, I'm curious because online on social media, you'll see people just talking about spend money on coaching, right? That's like a big thing. And I feel like if it's easy to find a coach to spend money on, but what's harder and I think what's more valuable is finding a mentor that isn't necessarily there to make money off of you. They're there because they're already successful, right? They're not trying to make, money off of you. Maybe they'll find investment opportunities with you or something like that. But when it comes to mentorship coaching, uh, you know, what are your thoughts on kind of finding people? Is that helpful? Do you need a mentor to be successful or not to, to be successful, to be more successful? What are your thoughts?
So I think there are three types of people you need to help. I do think you need coaches. They help with performance or mindset.
Mhm.
Um, what I would say on that one is find be smart around how you spend your money on that. Everyone and their dog thinks they can be an executive coach. And so find the people who have skills. And so there's mindset versus performance. And so I think you can find people mindset or and accountability, by the way. You can find someone who's going to hold you to task. And I think there's a certain, skill required for that. And then there's those who can actually coach you on how to perform. And in many cases, they need to have done it themselves. Now, sports analogy, the coach hasn't necessarily been the player, and so I get it. You can be a successful coach without being the star athlete, but I do think in business, my recommendation is to find those who have experience doing it directly. The next is the mentors, as you talk about, and that's important because um, finding a diverse set of mentors. It's not always either someone who's done it exactly before they've owned their own business, they've exited, or in the corporate world. Doesn't always have to be someone that's higher up the food chain than you are. Yes, I do think that's helpful, but I think you need to find diversity in mentors, those who have done it before. Maybe you're looking to acquire a new skill. So maybe to your point on finance, have someone that's in your orbit who's going to help give you some guidance. And sure, yes, you still need a fractional CFO to help you, but fine. Or maybe you're looking to shift gears and change industries or gain some new skills. So find people who have that. but also just broader diversity of lived experience. And I'm a big DEI proponent. So cultural lived experience, all of those things, just the ability to like be more creative and innovative in the way you think. So like I'd say go out broadly around like mentorship. And there's tons of great ways to do it. And in some cases, it's a little bit more like a personal board of directors. For small businesses, they've got, EO, entrepreneurs organization. So and then when you elevate to a higher level, then you go to like a president's organization, and there's lots of like, groups of fine, they can be great mentors. And the last is a sponsor. And this is a little bit more for like traditional corporate than, many of the entrepreneurs that might be listening to your show. And in that case, sponsorship, however, is earned. So I will choose to sponsor someone. And by that, I mean, I am advocating for an individual when they're not in the room. And I do that because I believe, or I know their performance. I believe in their potential, and I recognize the strength of their brand, who they are as a human beyond performance and potential. And so I think if you can find three coaches, mentors, and sponsors, then that's well-rounded to help support you in your professional journey.
Yeah, interesting. I never thought about a sponsor like that because I was curious what you meant by sponsor, and that is great. So when you say you chose a sponsor, so do you have one sponsor at a time? Do you have multiple people, you sponsor? How does that work? I'm curious.
Uh, it depends. I mean,
Sure.
and quite honestly, so yes, I choose. I mean, it doesn't take a significant amount of, I'm going to say, time. Now, I tend to invest. I tend to almost be a dual mentor and sponsor for people. So in which case there's more time, because with mentors, we have scheduled calls. We'll, go back and forth on pinging one another, text, Slack, whatever the channel is. But just to be a sponsor for someone, to me, I don't think of that at all as any kind of burden. This is me. Maybe I'm networking and connecting them with the right people. Maybe I'm putting their names in places and in rooms that never would have been before. But for me to do that, like, again, I believe in that individual. So this is why I say for me, it's personal. I choose. You
Mhm.
don't match make with sponsorship. You can match make on the mentor side, but you're not matchmaking here for sponsors. I'm going to choose who I do that, because ultimately it's my name and reputation on the line for those I choose to sponsor. So I couldn't even tell you necessarily how many I have at a particular time. It's just they're people, that are here in my brain, and when the opportunity is right. And sometimes it's organic, and others I'll manufacture it because maybe I know they're in need. So it could be limitless, but couldn't tell you a number.
Sure, sure. Yeah, being a connector is always a good person to be. Being able to introduce people to other people, and you brought up a good point about mentors because I've, you know, I guess I always envisioned the mentor as that person that's been super successful, but really, a mentor can be even say your brother who just has a normal job, but you talk about situations with them, right? So that is a good point on getting multiple, kind of inputs based on background, based on experience, because that person that's successful doesn't, they failed a lot, so it's not like they're always right anyways, right? So that's a good thing to bring up, and that's some good insight. So when it comes to building partnerships, because of course you did a lot of this, and are doing a lot of this. So when it comes to building strategic partnerships, not only from a standpoint of uh, revenue and things like that and branding, but how can business owners or those heads of, business development, how can they go about finding those right partnerships? If it's suppliers, if it's distributors, if it's, marketing collaborations, a lot of the time those people are looking at those partnerships that they don't want it just to be a year and move on, right? They'd like it to be long term. So what are some things that people should take a look at and also do when they're trying to build those?
I talk a lot about relationship based selling. Um, and so people do business with people they like, they trust, therefore they want to do business with. And I think this is we should be thinking about that in a multitude of ways. So in the way you're describing, in terms of how do we partner with others, who do we hire? or want to work for, and our customers are clients as well. And so for me, I have long since approached every relationship like one is a potential business relationship. I don't create two spheres. I don't have like the personal sphere and the work sphere.
Mhm.
It's all life. And so, bringing those, I've long since just brought those together. So the woman whose company that I bought, that I later sadly had to sue, I coached our daughter's hockey team. That's how we met. That like I believe to be open to that. And so for me, it's also when I am intentional on a business standpoint, I would like to partner with, I would like to have this person as a client. I build relationships from like with initially, although I have a vision in mind and a goal or objective to do business with this individual, I build it from a place of authenticity and genuine care. I I want to build a relationship with someone, and as a result of that, I just assume we're going to be able to do business. We're going to meet, we're going to like one another, we're going to have common shared interests, passions, values, whatever it is. And so that, however, takes time. And it's often in opposition with the going back to incentives. We're incentive like sale. We got to get this in the quarter, in the quarter. Well, these are longer term. So I think always be. So there's a book called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. And he's a shameless self-promoting consultant. However, and so put that aside if you're going to read his book.
Sure.
However, he's got amazing tactics around building a network, and he talks about it from doing it from a place of generosity and not greed. And then there's more tactics over like who you go and network with, et cetera. And so, that was a book I read a long, long time ago. And my husband jokes that for him, it's always eat alone because I am always networking and I'm always out and engaging with people. And so to your question on partners, approach it from the same way. And by the way, they may move to a different like vendor or supplier. And hopefully because you've got such a good relationship, you'll be able to extend that to, that new supplier as well.
Yeah. No, never eat alone. I'm gonna have to read that. I typed that in on Google. The second thing is Reddit entrepreneur. I read Never Eat Alone, so you don't have to. Here are the talking points.
Well, actually, I will give your listeners that there's a service called Blinkist. And they currently have a promotion on 25, it's only 25% of their normal price. It's like $25 a year. So whatever, even if you pay $100 a year, you can get all these amazing books in an extremely short form that you can either choose to read or listen to. And so you can get a whole book and I can hear it in 10 minutes, done. And I've got all the major concepts. And if you want to go deeper, go buy the book.
Interesting. They got Atomic Habits. It's like a couple minutes long.
Exactly.
I feel like I heard an ad about this a couple months ago, probably from a YouTuber, and never looked at this. This is interesting. There's also the one app that if you have like an article open, it'll actually like be able to read it and then say it out loud and speak it
Oh,
to you. I forgot what that app's called, but that's really interesting too. Um, okay, so partnerships. I'm curious when it comes to relationships, specifically with, let's just say, friends, for example, or family members when you're in business together. So there's four owners at my company, and three of us were friends for a while, but two of us, myself and another, go way back, 20 years almost. So we sometimes butt heads, more so than, you would just with a normal, I guess, business partner, right? So what are your thoughts on going in business with friends? What are your thoughts on going in business with family members? Does that lead to problems? But also I think it's a double-edged sword, right? Because my thought is it may cause a little bit more headaches, but on the back end, I think as long as you have good friends, there's more trust there as well. So what are your thoughts?
Uh, it is a mixed for sure. And so I think, um, I mean, talking about trust, it's inherent because you are family members, friends, whatever. And so, and generally then there's this absolute shared mission around success. But things are become personal. Like what should be a business challenge that, or, that you're working to solve becomes personal. And again, sometimes you just know too much and you can use that. And so the ability to create that separation becomes critically important, but that said, it hasn't prevented me from doing it. I'm very mindful of, the first company I bought, I was 20 years old. And I bought it as a side business. I was working full time. So I brought in a friend to help,
Yep.
and it was good and she was great, but we at some point sort of clashed on some things, and ultimately I moved across the country and I sold her the business. But then when I bought that business in 2017 from this one woman, I brought my husband into it, and I'm like how's this going to be? But actually it worked. I mean, he and I and our styles, it's probably why we're together for 11 years now, works so well. I'm very different. His marriage vow, and it was very appropriate for business too, is he's the patience to my impatience. And so finding that great blend. So I've continued to do it. Again, I want people that I know, that I can trust. And going back to, like, I know their skill, or if they don't have it. So in fact, for my husband, this was a very new business. So I needed to teach him some of those things, but I know he's super bright and I knew the potential. So performance potential, and then who they are as a human. And so bringing people you already know a number of those elements to can be great, but you've got to find some and create some boundaries around how you're going to work professionally, despite the personal relationships.
Yeah, I always found it interesting when people are like, "Don't do business with, family, friends." It's like, what are you supposed to find, a random stranger off the street? Who are you supposed
Yeah.
to do business with? Yeah, that's always been something. I also find it interesting that there's a lot of people that say they would never wanna work with their significant other, which I find odd. It's like, okay, maybe not every day, like, we work right next to each other, but saying, like, you would never wanna work with your significant other is kind of an odd statement. I don't know.
Well, it isn't. It is and it isn't. So
Yep.
actually, I had been coaching last year the COO of a company, and her husband is the CEO.
Mhm.
So I mean, you never escape one another. There's never me independent alone time. So even just from that aspect, but there could be some funky dynamics. I felt like at times as I coached her, I was doing a little bit of like couples counseling as well, even though he wasn't on the line. But some of the dynamics that like are created by that. So um, uh, bringing my husband into that business, I didn't plan on, like, I bought the company, but I wasn't planning on working. I will say that I love him dearly and we're amazing partners, but uh, and COVID proved that, like, that togetherness, that we were good. But I don't know that I would want to do like 100% all of my work with him either. So I think if I, again, find the balance that works.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, we're being CEO and COO, that sounds like a potential headache for sure.
Yeah.
Because then you're just bringing all those issues home, right? Um, okay, so when it comes to, no, we got a little bit more time here. How long do you have? You got to be off anytime?
I need to grab. I haven't eaten today, and I have a 1:30 Eastern call, so I need to. I can
Cool.
maybe go another like 5-10 minutes or something.
Well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up here in a second. So, tell us where people can find you. Tell us where people can go ahead and buy your book. Yeah, tell the audience where can they find you, and then we'll go ahead and close this
Well,
thing out here
so
in a
what
little
I
bit.
will say is I've worked. There's a reason why I wrote a book on personal branding, and I'm known to be a leader in that space. If you Google my name, Victoria Pelletier, I'm almost everything that comes up in the first many, many pages. That said, to make it easy, I have a website, which is Victoria dash or hyphen Pelletier.com. People can buy my books from there, but you can buy my books anywhere that they are sold. Or if you're like me, you prefer audio, you can find it on Audible, Spotify, whatever. And on my website, it also has the links for those who would prefer to connect or follow me on LinkedIn or my public Instagram or Facebook accounts as well.
Perfect. I think I butchered your name at the beginning of this podcast, by the way. I
No worries.
apologize. All right, perfect. So yeah, it was great discussion. Thank you for joining us. A lot of insight. You could tell she knows what she's talking about. So please, if you're looking for a good read, go to the website, and we will have that, of course, linked here below. All right, Victoria, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, as always, for joining us, and thank you for everyone for listening. However, that's all the time we have. We will be back next week. New episode, new guests, and more of myself. As always, if you're watching now, please like, review, subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell us how you liked it, how you didn't. If you want to see someone on, let us know. If you're recording a podcast or want to record a podcast, you can reach out to them at halfcoaststudios.com here in St. Louis. But if you just need them to edit and distribute, they can do that as well. And as always, Vi Media, best damn marketing company on the planet. You can reach out to us at vi.media or just reach out to me personally, Eric Kemp Brown, across all platforms. Victoria, thank you once again for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and everyone
Thanks
have
for
a good
having me.
day. Absolutely.
Hey there, St. Louis podcast listeners. We've got some exciting news from our friends over at Farmers Insurance of St. Louis, led by the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Lee of Farmers Insurance.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking for a job or to own your own business under a brand that everyone and their cousin is familiar with, Mark Lee with Farmers Insurance of St. Louis is recruiting insurance agency owners here in St. Louis for their Farmers Insurance Mentorship Program.
And as many of you are aware, Garrett and I have owned quite a few successful and award-winning businesses over the years. And in a past life, one of those was a farmer's insurance agency out of Chesterfield, Missouri.
Eric and I know firsthand how hard it is to start a business under a brand that no one has heard of and convince consumers and businesses to trust that you're an authority figure in your industry.
And as many of you know, we own an award-winning marketing firm, Vi Media, the one that Garrett was just discussing. And building that company's reputation literally took years. We're still building it to this day, and it's been 8 years in the making. However, with the Trusted Farmers Insurance Agency name on the building, we got started when we started our Farmers Insurance Agency. The trust was already built and has been for 96 years.
And if you can't do math, that means Farmers Insurance has been around since 1928. Luckily, you don't need to be a human calculator to get rich as an owner of your very own Farmers Insurance Agency.
Nope. All you have to do is reach out to the one and only Mark Lee, the leader of Farmers Insurance in the greater St. Louis metropolitan area.
That's right. So ensure he continues to sponsor our show and your favorite podcast, the St. Louis podcast, by quitting your job today and calling Mark Lee. I wouldn't even wait for him to answer your call. Call your boss now, quit, and become your very own business owner.
Visit insurancecareerstl.com. That is insurancecareerstl.com. Should we spell it out?
Yes. It would
INSURANCE, career, CAREER, STL.com, insurancecareerstl.com. Go there now.